Hello, everybody. Welcome to this episode of Sunday Messages. And today, what I have for you is a widely misunderstood topic, and that is all about action. Personally, I think action is one of the most misunderstood elements of human life, if I'm just being completely honest. And one of the big elements of my work and the work that I do with clients and people who come into my world is really about getting more defined and more intentional with action rather than focusing on quantity of action. And this is the big piece that is tripping people up the most. So there's a very, very strong paradigm that still exists on the planet, which is rooted in the masculine order of operations. So this is trading effort, trading exertion, trading action for a result, right? Moving the 3D pieces and then getting the result in 3D. It's input, output, input, output. And the thing is, it does technically work. Anything can work depending on what energy is behind it. So if you have all of your beliefs wrapped up in the harder I work, the more money I make, or the more I exert, the more I earn the things around me, you can have a very, very strong association between those two things and it will come to life. So when you slack off, you're going to face consequences. When you're working really hard and busting ass to get things done, then you're going to see a result come out of that, and it's going to strengthen the connection between the action and the result. And so the problem that people run into is when they're ready for more, but they've already maxed out the amount of energy that they can exert. Well, where do you go from there? It's not scalable. Something's got to go. Something has to change. And so ideally what we want to do is not get to the point where we are maxed out before we start making adjustments. But the general trend even now is even for spiritual entrepreneurs, I see it a lot. There's still a lot of formulas. There's still a lot of heady, very cerebral business stuff involved. There's still a lot of that actually overrides what I would say is the most important part, which is the alignment. I consider there to be two different types of action. So you have aligned action, and the ideal situation, the ideal circumstance is that you would be aligned before taking any sort of action. That is the ideal state for you to be in, because if you're super, super dialed in, you're really energetically squeaky clean, you're very clear and crisp and feeling your best, you're in full alignment with your spirit, then taking action from that inspired space is going to yield really profound results every single time, because the aligned action is what generates the most momentum, period, end of story. It's always going to create significantly greater impact than if you take a lot of low quality dormant action. So by dormant action, I mean just doing for the sake of doing, just doing for the sake of pleasing the mind, just doing for the sake of feeding the ego, feeding the old paradigm that everyone's really caught up in. I'm saying the general everyone, right? So if you're acting from that space, then all of a sudden your actions are not charged. They're not infused with, we could call it your soul's path or your soul's guidance or your higher self. It's like that's completely lost in all of it. And the dormant action, it's never going to hold a candle to aligned action. When you're in the habit of taking clear, aligned action that is really, really satisfying to your soul, nothing else will come close. Nothing else will yield those kind of results. And so the dormant action, it's like you can take it. You might get a hit of satisfaction every now and again. You might get some results here and there, but it's not going to have the oomph. It's not going to have all of the energetic alignment backing it so that it actually drives you. It propels the singular action into a domino effect of all of these other things spiraling out from that single momentous aligned move. So the general trend is that people are hyper-focused on taking dormant action because there's too much of an association between action equals results. What I would recommend is that we start putting our attention on aligned action, letting that actually take priority over anything else. And of course, the reason why I'm suggesting this is because, one, it's going to help people conserve energy rather than constantly burning energy. And the other reason is that it's going to make people way more satisfied in the end. So if we have more satisfied people with more time on their hands to give to themselves, that's really, really beneficial for literally everyone. I'm going to explain the general trends that I see regarding this and the process that people go through. So there is one factor that I do want to just throw out there so that people can really keep this in mind. If you say, well, that's all fine and good, Sydney, you're talking about aligned action, but I don't have time for that. I have, 12-hour shifts that I have to go to, blah, blah, blah. And I agree that there is a certain level of continuity that your human needs in order for things to make sense, right? Because we are on Earth, there is like a linear experience that we are having in terms of the unfolding of our story. There's a level of it making sense to a certain degree. So yes, if right now you have a job where you're doing these really long swing shifts or whatever it is that you have going on, I'm not saying, don't go to work until you're aligned. That's not what I'm suggesting at all. Let's stick with this example because it's good. It'll be helpful for people. Okay, so you have really, really long shifts. Well, the pocket where you have the most power and influence is going to be in all of the time, in all of the hours in between working and sleeping. So that time that you have in that space is where you want to double down with your intentionality of what are you doing with that time, because it is precious. It's not scarce. Don't think about time as being scarce, but it's precious. It's something that you want to treat with the utmost intentionality to extract the most out of it. That's really what you want to do with your time so that you can capitalize on it the most, make the most of it, have the most impact, to get the most refueled. There is an element of, okay, yeah, let's dial in this time that I do have available to me and make the most out of those pockets during the day or during the night. So during these pockets, what I would say is that that's where you want to focus all of your energy on getting into alignment. Because if you're in alignment, you're going to feel better. You're going to be more energized. It's going to put you in a different mood. It's going to completely change your state. And it doesn't take time. It's not something that you're going to have to work at for 2 hours a day. I've had days like that, but that's not every time. It can be something small, something subtle that completely shifts your state. For most of you, if you're in that situation, I would say the most important thing to focus on before taking action of any kind would simply be quieting the mind. Just get that thing to shut up for a little bit and it'll do wonders. I'm serious. Quiet the mind for just a couple minutes in the morning. Quiet the mind before you step into work. Quiet the mind before you sit down to dinner with your kids. Quiet the mind before, just for a couple minutes, literally 60 seconds of just focusing on your breath, doing something to pull yourself out of the mind will be magic. And also I would do an audit. If you're turning on the news, question that. If your time is precious and you're filling it with fear porn, seriously audit that. If you're reading articles that upset you, if you're mindlessly scrolling Instagram, you need to clean that up if you're serious about getting into alignment, because these things will throw you off. It's like you're already tired at the end of the day, and then you want to turn on the TV and hear about death and tragedy and natural disasters. Is that really what you want to be filling your space and your field with? Because these things will exhaust you. If you're tired and you're watching the news, I would say, okay, well, the first thing to do is cut that out. Because it's repetitive, it's draining you. I mean, I swear the news is one of the worst things that you can program yourself with. Because it's all tragedy. So if you want to feel exhausted, turn on the news. If you want to feel energized, consider turning it off. You will be amazed by how much energy you get back when you start cutting out things that don't make you feel good. When you start making the alignment in the pockets of your precious time, when that becomes the priority and you start really, really fine-tuning to focus on things that make you feel genuinely good and genuinely fulfilled, even if it's only for a few minutes, you're going to see that you naturally gravitate towards more of those activities. And to make the distinction between fulfilling activities and numbing activities, if the activity feels like it's not clearing your mind, or if it feels like I'm just checking this box off of the list, but it's not activating you, that's probably not an aligned choice. That's just you doing something from the mental body. But I highly doubt that the simple act of checking a box is really going to fill you with intense gratitude and satisfaction. If it does that for you, great. Do more of it. I'm just letting you know I haven't actually seen that in my personal practice with anyone that I've ever worked with. When I'm saying focus on alignment and feeling good, feeling genuinely good, grateful, satisfied, fulfilled, content, happy, joyous, anything in the positive emotional range is going to be more magnetic for more of that. It's going to put you in the right state so that you generate more momentum in that direction. And that is what we want to grow in your world if you do have time constraints of some sort, if you are operating inside of that paradigm in this moment. So that is my advice for you. Be very, very conservative with your energy and beware of energy vacuums. Beware of numbing, beware of overconsumption, beware of the times when you check out. I'm not saying that, like let's call it unconsciously going unconscious. I had a mentor who called it that, like watching Netflix or working out. Those types of things can help, but the more fulfillment you can access, the better this is going to work and the more energized you're going to feel. So that's what you want to aim for rather than bleeding energy, going unconscious. You got to be careful with that. So let's cover another situation that I commonly see with people. And let's use the example of you're looking for a job. So what a normal average Joe would tell you is pound the pavement, go put out 150 job applications, and you're bound to get one back. It's simply a matter of numbers, blah, blah, blah. That is what probably any old person would guide you to do. However, if we're focusing on aligned action, if that is the priority, then you wouldn't want it to be a numbers game, because you're actually only looking for one job and you want the one job to be the right job for you at this point in time. So the advice in this situation is don't focus on the numbers, focus on your feeling state, focus on what thoughts are you thinking, what's your mood when you go in to do something like send out an application or a resume. You really want to clean up your emotional state. And if you want to play in the advanced realm, I would say don't even apply to a job unless it feels like a full body fuck yes, and it's absolutely in alignment with you. Now that really freaks people out, but we could say that's varsity level alignment. But the junior level alignment would be, okay, you can apply to the jobs, you can write the resume, you can do all of the practical things. Just clean your state up before you do it. Just clean up your thoughts, clean up your feelings, really get into a space where you feel better. And then take action after you prime yourself a little bit. As an example of this, I had an old client that I worked with last year, and we no longer work together. I absolutely adore her. She's wonderful. And she sent me an email recently where she told me about the dream job finally coming in. And one of the things that we worked on together was she was continually beating herself up about not hunting for jobs, not doing all of these things and, pounding the pavement and all of the practical stuff. And I continually steered her away from all of the practical things. And I had her exclusively focus on alignment, focus on aligned action, focus on extracting some inspiration, getting that to actually fall into her field. And of course, how it actually happened wasn't from playing a numbers game, but it was one day she felt the impulse to check her LinkedIn, and boom, the job was there. She had it within a few days of actually seeing the job posting on LinkedIn. So it was just like that. It was already lined up. She didn't need to work herself to the bone. She didn't need to send out 150 applications. She was deep in self-care, deep in feeling good, spending lots of time with family. And then from there, the action revealed itself to her from there. And now she travels, she works with food and wine and chocolate and all of these wonderful things. It is literally what she mapped out for herself when we worked together. But it was not the brute force that got it. She could have spent all of her time not enjoying herself and forcing herself into applying to jobs 8 hours a day. You can do that. It will probably eventually work if you do enough of that. But what I'm saying is, if you zoom out, if you look at the entire life experience that you have, and all of these pockets of getting to the next thing or the next destination are filled with, I took so much action until my fingers bled, then your life is going to be composed of a series of events where it's, I took so much action until my fingers bled. Opposed to, I knew that I needed to get to these different destinations, but in the process of getting to that next place, I really just wanted to enjoy myself. And when you zoom out of that life, if your moment by moment leaps are full of pleasure and enjoyment and fun and satisfaction, all of that will ultimately add up into a fulfilling, satisfying life. So for this last example, let's assume you have total time freedom. Either you're a contractor or you don't have very many time blocks where you have to show up for things. It's a little bit more fluid, so you do have a certain amount of control over your time or your day, so on and so forth. My suggestion here is somewhat similar. So for the junior level of this is, okay, there are things that are on your to-do list that you actually want to get done. Okay, fair. We all have that. Now, focus on priming yourself, getting yourself into the proper state, getting yourself as aligned as you possibly can before doing anything on your to-do list. Don't look at it, don't focus on it, don't touch it until you are feeling good or content or some type of satisfied, fulfilled, or clear-minded. Because having a clear mind is also a great space to approach things from. So that's the junior level. Prime yourself first before stepping into action. The varsity level is, I do not want you to do anything at all until you are feeling so inspired and so compelled and so yummy that you cannot help yourself, but it just comes pouring out of you. That's where you really get into aligned creation. So this podcast, for example, I'm recording this, it is 7:37 on a Sunday evening. Now, generally, I don't work on Sundays. I really like Sundays. It's just Sundays and Mondays, those are my favorite days of the week. And so I don't force myself to work at all on either of these days. However, I do have a lot of podcast content that has just kind of been percolating. So I've had that sitting over there. Like, yeah, I want to do these podcasts, but I'm not going to do it if it feels like pulling teeth. I'm just not putting myself through that. So I won't make myself work. This is typically where people start shitting their pants and freaking out. I'm never going to get anything done. What if I'm just sitting on the couch for the rest of my life? What if? And I could have had that internal dialogue today. I could have said, I can't believe you're not even doing anything. You're just sitting around and meditating, and you're just spending all this time in your imagination, and it's ridiculous. I could have gone into a really judgmental internal dialogue about what I'm doing. But at a certain point, you do have to start trusting your guidance. At a certain point, you have to, quit sucking on the teat of action equals results. You have to get off that train and really start putting faith, trust, knowing into your guidance system and your soul, knowing better than you. Knowing better than the human version, the human expression of you. Your guidance knows more. Your soul knows better. Your soul is actually what you want to have sit in the driver's seat when you're doing all of this stuff. And the more you can do that, the more impact a single action is going to have. So as some would say, fucking around today, not doing anything, right? I'm just kind of floating, enjoying myself, taking my time, meditating a lot, blah, blah, blah. I'm doing all of that. People would look at that, judge it, and say you're not doing anything. You're squandering the day. Au contraire, I completely disagree, because as soon as I sat in the bath, because of course I was like, well, what next? What feels good now? Okay, a bath feels good. And then what happens? Podcast content dumps into my mind. Now I'm all jazzed. I'm all excited to record these podcasts. It feels really good. It feels really exciting. Now I want to get this material out to you because I'm excited about it. And all of a sudden my stamina is back. Here I was thinking all day that today really could be a day where I make absolutely no moves. I don't actually take any type of action. It could be one of those days, and they do come from time to time. But in reality, what I was doing all day is focusing my attention very, very consciously on filling my cup, filling my tank, staying really, really full and brimming all day, focusing on my personal satisfaction, getting really clear, getting into a super aligned, juicy space, and then boom, energy, content, material, right next steps, and it feels good. This brings me to my next point, which is I do not agree that action has to be painful. There are so many people who, once again, have this association that taking action is like this back-breaking effort that is painful and exhausting, and it's something that's dull and mind-numbing, and it's completely void of play. Unsurprisingly, I don't agree with this at all. I think that's a terrible, terrible measurement or metric to use for success. Like, oh, well, now I'm bored and dissatisfied and I'm aching, so that means that I've taken enough action for the day. No. I personally don't want the action that I take to make me feel bad. I don't dig that. I do not celebrate that. I don't advocate for that. No, I'm not into that. You do not have to suffer in the process of taking action. Let's go back to the example of applying to jobs. If you're priming yourself properly, if you're getting yourself into alignment, if you're in a really solid state, then applying to jobs is going to feel much less painless than if you were to do it without getting yourself prepared energetically. Now, if you're doing the varsity level thing where you're not doing anything unless you're completely compelled and inspired to apply for a job or call a friend or whatever you feel inspired to do, then the action is actually going to feel good. It's going to feel fulfilling. It's going to feel satisfying. It's going to feel like joy and pleasure and satisfaction just for the sake of the action itself. It ceases to even be about a particular result that comes from the action. It's just the action feels good. Once again, what happens when you add all of that up over time? Well, now you have a really fulfilling and satisfying life. Not a single moment, but all of those added up over time is a satisfying life experience. So this is where the micro really does evolve into the macro. The macro is made up of micro moments. So you want to be super intentional with the micro. And that is what will carry you in the direction that you want to go. Now, I'm all for dreaming big, and I'm very, very future oriented. That's definitely where my personality leans. My mind leans into the future. So it definitely makes me prone to anxiety more than anything else. And it's good for creation to be future oriented, of course. But if all of a sudden my future plans or the places that I want to get to actually make it so that I cannot stay present and I'm not able to be intentional with what would feel good in the moment-to-moment experience, I'm gonna get lost. So the journey is not gonna feel good. It's not gonna feel satisfying. I'm gonna get to the destination, but it will be a shit ride. So this is, yes, I am reminding you that the journey, I won't say that the journey is more important than the destination, because I don't actually agree with that. I think the destinations and the milestones and the big whopper manifestations, of course, receiving that is a blast. Being able to do all of this and create and pull things in from the quantum field, like, yeah, it's a shit ton of fun. Of course. Love it. Love everything about it. But if you want to extract even more fulfillment out of the entire process, and if you want the entire breadth of the experience to feel really good, then you want to be intentional with your action and the state that you're in when you're taking action. And if it truly is in alignment with you, or if it's just frantically doing things, frantically putting things out, frantically just taking action for the sake of taking action without any intentionality behind that, that's just a one-way ticket to burnout. Of course, everything that I've described in this episode is a practice. It's something that feeling into, okay, am I aligned or not? Is this an inspired action or not? Is this dormant? What are my intentions? What are my motives behind doing this thing? What am I actually satisfying? It takes time to tease all of this apart. It takes a minute to get a feel for it and get into a rhythm that works for you, right? I'm in a space now where, of course, I don't have to, quote unquote, spend time. That's not how I wield my time anymore. It used to be. Back in the day, that's how my business started, was by what I'm doing with my time. I was very much focused on output. I was very much focused on quantity. Unironically enough, I make way more money now. I have way more time now. I have way more fulfillment now, way more satisfaction. Not because of the efforts of the past, not because of all of that, but because of how intentional I am being now and the results that come from my intentionality. The alignment is what you want to be behind the action. If you want real momentum, if you want big movements, then alignment is key. That is the secret sauce. That is what you want to be baked into the cake, so to speak. So, you know that I use the cake analogy a lot, and I talk about the importance of the ingredients that you put into that cake. So whatever energy you're holding when you're baking the cake is what's going to come out of the oven when it's fully baked. So if you're baking your cakes with alignment, then you can be absolutely certain that when that cake comes out of the oven, it is going to be super satisfying. It's going to be super delicious. It's going to be soul fulfilling. And the entire experience of baking the cake is going to feel way more fun than if you're just slapping some ingredients together and throwing it in the oven. That's not going to have the same level of pleasure. It's not going to taste as good. It's not going to feel as good. It's not going to be as remarkable as if you were to add a little bit more intentionality and magic and focus before you start taking these actions. This episode hopefully has pushed you out of frantic flailing or dormant action, which can lead to spinning your wheels in the mud, and into focusing on your state. Focus on your state. Focus on your state. Focus on your state. That is the biggest piece of advice that I have for you today. And I hope you've enjoyed this episode. Now, one thing that I do want to let you all know is that the Art of Rulership is coming up on August 3rd. We begin. And that is all about leadership. It is all about boundaries. It is all about calibration. So having people calibrate to the standards that you hold. It's going to be going way in depth on the quality of relationships and really taking control over your kingdom. So if you feel like you are ready to really step into mastering your boundaries, mastering creation, really stepping into healthy leadership, not in a self-sacrifice, old paradigm, old way of doing things, but really focused on the standards that you hold for yourself, that you hold for others, that you hold for your quality of life. We're going to go into pleasure and boundaries and archetypes and all sorts of good stuff. So it is a 2-week intensive with me. There is a payment option if you need to split it up a little bit, so that is available to you as well. We start August 3rd, as I mentioned. So if you would like to check that out, go to onyxhealing.com/rulership, and I will make sure to put it in the description box and in the show notes as well. So that is the latest from me. That's what I've got going on. So if you would like to go deeper with me and have some intensive work with me, this is the best way to do it right now. That is the next thing that I have coming up. And of course, if you have found this episode to be helpful, if you think there's a friend or someone that you know who could benefit from this episode, go ahead and send it over to them. It is always, always, always appreciated when you share my work. And I'm sending you all so much love. Thank you for spending some time with me today, and I will talk to you all next time. Have a good one, everybody. Bye-bye.